You know, when I was a little boy, Sunday mornings was all about the funnies. All those wonderful cartoons and comics that I would look at in the paper in black and white during the week, well, they were in color on Sundays. Well, I've always been a lover of cartoons and comics, so I'm very glad to introduce our next guest, Summerlea Kashar, the Executive Director of San Francisco's Cartoon Art Museum. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So since 1984,
yeah,
you've existed. Tell me about your history. I think a lot of people don't realize we have this incredible resource right here in San Francisco.
It's true. I mean, we're not a big museum. We're a smaller museum, but we actually are one of the only museums in the whole United States that exhibits original cartoon art. So we actually tend to be a destination for travelers from all over. We have stuff that's locally based, but then we have people that come from Japan and Europe and they want to see us, and this is where you're going to see original cartoon art.
Well, you know, and you talk about being a destination just for art. Now you really are in a tourist destination. Later this year, you're actually going to open in the heart of
Fisherman's Wharf. Yeah,
I mean,
we're very excited. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was hard. We really enjoyed the Yerba Buena neighborhood. There's a lot of really great partners that we made there, but there's so much to look forward to up at Fisherman's Wharf, and we're very excited.
Yeah. Now, you brought a book with you, the LGBTQAIU creators from Prismus Comics present Alphabet.
Yeah.
Talk to me about this book.
So Alphabet was, it's a book that was produced by Stack Deck Press, which is a division of Prism Comics. And we have been working with Prism. We did an exhibit of this anthology. And so the basis for the anthology is really to get stories from all of the artists from sort of the diverse representation, which is, you know, all the different extra letters after LGBT.
Right.
You know, they seem to be adding more and more letters.
Yeah, when I was young, it was just gay, but yeah.
So it's a wonderful way for people to express their experiences, and you know, a lot of it when we were doing the exhibit, it was just after the Pulse shooting, and there was a lot of other issues, the bathroom, the transgender sort of issue with the bathrooms as well, and it gives people a forum to sort of discuss it. And having this book was great. It was really a wonderful experience for us because we did an exhibition of the artwork in addition to our Queer Comics Expo, which we've been running for 3 years, and we're going to be doing our 4th year this year in July.
At Some Arts, correct?
We did it at Some Arts.
I remember that last year.
Last year, and we're going to do it there again, even though we will have our own space. We had such a wonderful experience there. They were so great, and we just feel like there's more opportunity for us to really build partnerships there. So, yeah, it seems like we could do partner things at both locations and really build on that. Yeah. So we're very excited to do that.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about cartoon art?
That it's for kids. I mean, really, because especially in the United States, that's the perception, that it's just the funnies. And there's so many more powerful stories coming out of, you know, personal experiences. And Marjane Satrapi, who did Persepolis, which they made into an animation, in a feature film animation. Art Spiegelman, who did Mouse, that talked about his father's experience in the German war camps. Right. And it's a wonderful way to communicate in areas like political cartoons where you can touch on subjects that are almost too difficult to write about.
Yeah.
And so it does create a lot of dialogue, and I think people are now, you know, more now than ever understanding that it does have this ability to have such a wonderful dialogue that goes on.
Well, we've got a few images here from the collection. Some great cartoonists paying tribute to San Francisco and Cartoon Art Museum. You got Dennis the Menace saying, "Congratulations, Cartoon Art Museum." You have one of my favorites from my childhood, Family Circus, with some images of Fisherman's Wharf. And
yeah, the Family Circus ones were actually some of the earliest
I was
pieces
about to say
in
that
the
kind of
collection.
got lucky, yeah.
And I think, you know, they knew where we were. So they, you know, they gave us the pieces that were very relevant to us. So those cartoons, I mean, Bill Keane had an incredibly funny and actually in his personal life more adult sense of humor. The Family Circus cartoons were more family oriented, but he was a very funny guy on all levels, and his son continues to draw the strip. So it's kind of great to have that.
Yeah, and I saw one of the other images. I think it's the final image we show is, you know, my personal favorite from childhood was Prince Valiant. I think it was formative for me. I know this sounds kind of silly, but You know, when you grew up in an age when there were no quote-unquote male role models, you know, seeing Prince Valiant was something that stayed with me as a young gay man through my life. So it had a significant impact
it's
on my life.
It's beautifully drawn.
Well, that's the other thing, that people see this and need to realize that this is art.
It is. I mean, a lot of these people, they were classically trained. They went through art school. You know, some people just self-trained. You have to be an artist. You have to be able to be a storyteller. And for the funnies, you have to be funny on top of all that and doing it every day. You know, I used to say, oh, people think cartoons, it's just a circle and a line. You know, I could do that. But you try doing that every day. It's not so easy.
Yeah. I remember we were speaking about a week ago about cartoon art and comics being innately political. Do you think that's true? That all cartooning in a way is political in the sense that it shines a light on our civic experience?
It is a form of expression. So yeah, I guess in that sense, absolutely, because, you know, for us, you know, cartoons are a drawing with or without words that tells a story. And the first American cartoon comic strip was the Yellow Kid. And he was this young Irish immigrant who was really talking to the general public about these issues in current events. And so a way to sort of explain it and give his opinion and for people to start that dialogue. So yeah, I guess you're right. I guess it is.
Do you think that, well, I know your answer because you said it to me, but is political cartooning more left or right?
Well, yeah, that was one of my discussions I've been having recently because we've done a number of political cartoon exhibits, and there's this sort of feedback where it's always like liberal cartoons, and it is hard to find a conservative cartoonist, a Republican cartoonist, and they don't tend to have quite the sting or the humor that the liberal. So I think innately the medium is sort of liberal, but when we do our exhibits, we try to offend everybody evenly.
Right. Well, you said that, I mean, you did an exhibit after 9/11 that you
We
said
did.
caused a bit of a stir.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very touchy subject for everyone. It was hard for people to talk about. There was so much pain and loss. And so having the cartoons gave people that. We had one that was very, you know, it was a pencil cartoon. It was not published, and it was the people coming off of the building. You can see the little figures. And that was very painful for people to see, but I think it's important to remember, you know, and so, you know, those are the kind of things that you can bring up in cartoon art and that we want to make sure that people understand and talk about.
Talk to me about the collection, the breadth of it, and some of what you consider the real, you know, anchor examples, you know, historic pieces of art that if you didn't see them in the museum, you wouldn't see them again.
Yeah, there are a lot. I mean, one of the things when we have our permanent, we usually have an area that's selections from the permanent collection. And our permanent collection is all based on donations to the museum. So we don't have this fancy acquisitions budget, but there are a number of artists that want to make sure that their art is out there in perpetuity. And so when we do the selections from the permanent collection, you can see pieces over the course of history. And a lot of people find stuff that, you know, it's not in print anymore.
Right.
You can't find the books. You know, Walt Kelly's Pogo is one of the favorites that you don't see as often anymore, but people come through. And that, you know, he did a lot of political undertones in all of his Pogo comic strips that, you know, a lot of people remember, but it's just not out there every day for people to see now.
So when did you fall under the comic spell?
I was, you know, I've always been in the arts realm, and my mother was an artist, and but, you know, I knew how hard it was to make a living watching my mother, and so I really didn't want to do that. But I did surround myself with art, and in the end, I sort of found my way into the nonprofit world, and when I came across the Cartoon Art Museum, I was already a fan of different comics and cartoons, and so it seemed to me a natural fit. And it's been a really educational experience. Like, I knew my own favorites, and
which were?
I was an early fan of the Sandman, and that sort of spun off into a lot of different artists and writers, and I liked all the indie comics too, like Dan Clowes and those kind of artists as well. And so, but every time we had a new exhibition, it was a new experience, a new, you know, something for me to learn, and it was just a marvelous thing. It was just, you know, so inspirational. and I've just enjoyed being able to work around that for so many years.
We've only got about a minute left. Why is San Francisco and the Bay Area such kind of a hotbed of cartooning and comics?
Yeah, I don't know if I could say for sure, but I mean, comic strips started. A lot of them started. Bud Fischer did Mutt and Jeff in the Chronicle.
Yeah.
That was the first time that was printed. So in the printing process here, there's a lot of old buildings that all were printing newspapers here in San Francisco. Also, the underground comics movement, which we're part of the Summer of Love coming up this summer.
50th anniversary of the Summer of Love.
Yeah, and the underground comics movement, we have a lot of friends in that industry. Last Gasp, who's a local publisher, and they were the first to produce the underground comics.
Great. So real quick before we close, when does your new building open?
I don't have an actual date yet, but spring.
Spring.
Spring. And so we'll come and we'll blossom with all the flowers.
Great. We'll see you in Fisherman's Wharf.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Summerlea Kashar, Executive Director of San Francisco's Cartoon Art Museum, where the funnies are not just funny, they're important. Thanks for watching. I'm David Perry. We'll see you next week on 10%.